we want to change everyone and make them in our image. It was tantamount to Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler said, we're the superior race, and everyone needs to be this way, and this is the way we're going to make everyone, and we're going to make them in this image, and if you disagree with us, we're going to exterminate you. And I'm like, guys, this is happening to everyone. I need you to wake up to understand what's going on. You're talking about 15,000 children being separated at the border. Do you understand that they separate 500,000 children in America annually? This is an adversarial relationship. If CPS comes into your life, you might as well, even though it's on the civil side, you might as well treat it like a criminal case. Keep your mouth quiet, get a lawyer. You're not going to talk yourself out of it. The only way you're going to get out of it is to fight your way out of it. And that's just it. It's designed to take your child.
Changers, I'm Sarah Westall. I have Dwight Mitchell coming to the program. He is the founder of the Family Preservation Foundation, which is taking on Child Protective Services. They messed with the wrong guy. They tried to take his children away from him, and he is a very successful business consultant, international. He's worked in over 100 countries. His business is very successful, and they just assumed he wasn't capable of taking care of his kids, and he watched this super corrupt system and what they did. And his organization has helped over 450 families so far, and he says, we're just getting started. This is just the beginning. And now they have a case at the Supreme Court. They have a super lawyer, Eric Cardell, who's already won 2 cases at the Supreme Court with, for different issues, but he knows how the system works. And it's so refreshing to see people take on these really corrupt organizations and do something. And what you'll learn is this organization has its origins in eugenics and technocracy. It's that big movement where they thought that they could take kids away from unworthy, pretty much poor parents and put them into worthy homes. And they thought that that would be way better for the kid. And it is if the kid's in an abusive situation, but if you're in a loving home, as everyone knows, if you're in a loving home where the parents care and raise you well, you're way better off than a wealthy home where they abuse you mentally. It's not about how much money you have. It's about how much love that you give and the mental stability. And they're all about poverty, and it's a mess. And it's expanded to be minorities and the poor. And he talks about that because it's an overwhelming number of minorities. But it's really, they started after the poor. It kind of sucks everybody in. It's the whole notion of how they were trying to break down the African-American family, which they've done a great job of doing that. And they've done a great job of sucking everybody into the problem too when it came to the drugs. I mean, that was a goal, is to break down the African-American family. They put the drugs into the inner cities. They're locking up all these black men. But what happened is it also sucked in everybody else. Now we have a breakdown of the nuclear family everywhere. Now you got this Marxist organization, Black Lives Matter, who is trying purposely to destroy the nuclear family. It's because it's the breakdown of the United States. It's on purpose. And Child Protective Services fits right in there. They're very corrupt, and they're used for all sorts of corrupt actions. And the system is so corrupt, you're finding falsified documents, judges that are corrupt, and he explains the whole thing. He says that people wouldn't even believe him when he was talking about how corrupt it was. And so he did this to just almost prove they messed with the wrong guy, I gotta tell you. So if you want to support this organization or learn more, you can go to the Family Preservation Foundation.org, and you can learn more. He has all these videos up there, and you can donate or whatever. But if you have somebody who's in the system, who's really struggling, who's a good parent, then he's somebody that can help them. And I've had so many emails on this subject, and so it's so refreshing to find somebody. As far as I know, he's the only organization in the country doing this, and especially going to the Supreme Court level. So we get into this is a long interview. It's a 2-parter. We get into all sorts of issues, and we discuss the politics. He says this isn't a political organization. We just want to fix the issue, because this isn't about politics, it's about healthy families. And so I agree 100% on that, although we do get into a little bit of politics because we got this crazy Marxist organization trying to destroy the United States, and he sees that too. And so we talk about that. So anyways, I don't want to waste much more time. Remember, there's a 2-parter, so be sure to look at the second part of this video as well. And let's get into this important interview with Dwight Mitchell. Hi, Dwight. Welcome to the program.
Hi, how are you, Sarah? It's great to be here.
I'm really excited to talk to you because you have been taking on CPS, Child Services, Protective Services, which I don't know if they're protective really, but they messed with the wrong person. And you are really going after them, and you're the only organization in this country that is petitioning at the Supreme Court level, which I love because I see so many people talking about all the problems, and you are trying to do something about it and have already won some cases. But I want you to first tell me what your organization is and what it does, and then we can get into why you started to do this.
Well, like most people who are activists against CPS, I became aware of what was going on when I got involved with CPS for ordinary parental discipline, or what I thought was ordinary parental discipline. As I went through this, I uncovered, to me, what I thought were injustices and things that were unconstitutional. I own a management consulting firm, and it's so successful. I've owned the firm for 27 years, and it's an international firm. I've been to about 108 countries. I've worked all over the world, Africa, Dubai, London, Spain, Italy. I've spent the majority of my adult life traveling for work. And so when I came upon what I felt was just a corrupt, unconstitutional system, I felt I had to do something about it. So I formed the organization called Family Preservation Foundation. And our number one goal is keeping children out of the foster care system. I think it's a failing system. By its own statistics, it's a failing system. If it were a regular business, it would be out of business. It would be bankrupt. You just couldn't run it that way. So I started the organization 3 years ago because I wanted to try and find a way to give back. I didn't want people to go through what I had been through. And while I was sitting there going through my ordeal, I was listening to the stories of the other families and the other mothers and fathers, and I couldn't believe what was going on, and how CPS was just running roughshod over all of these people. So I wanted to find out how many other people had experienced the same things I did, and so I started a Facebook group, and it started out with a few hundred people, and it just started to grow. I mean, it grew exponentially. Within 2 years, we have over 11,000 members.
Wow.
Probably close to 12 now. I think like 11,007. But it keeps growing. I mean, like daily, I get 20 to 30 people asking to join. I have like 3 administrators, and we still are having a difficult time keeping up because we ask questions, we make sure people are valid and have a CPS case. And I just wasn't aware that, by me starting this little group, that I would find out there were so many other people like myself. So I started to do something about it. And so when I first went to Eric Cardell and I approached him about putting together a lawsuit for the foundation and the parental rights group, our association, I told him we had to do something. I said, I want to do something that makes an impact. I said, I see all this talk going on, this fight CPS, this, all these parental rights group, but no one's doing anything legally. I said, I see nothing in the courts. I see no court cases. I see no self-help, no pro se. I see a bunch of parents who are writing things with no legal foundation, with no case law. And so I just saw this void, and I understood how all the parents were being entrapped and ensnared by CPS. Because I was, I can't say astute, because I was familiar with the law and court systems and contracts and things of that nature from working all over the world. I understood what CPS was doing from the very beginning was wrong. And so I asked for my discovery within 2 months into the case. I was just like, I want all of my discovery. And so a lot of people don't understand that process. They don't understand how to retrieve it and things of that nature. So when I tell people I had over 600 pages of discovery, they're like, well, how'd you get all that? I'm like, you just have to ask for it and you have to know how to ask for it. And if CPS tells you no, then you go to the judge and you have to follow motion. So then I started a video, a CPS defense video series, and now I think I have like 15 videos, and I've been told they're a little long because there's so much information to disseminate. What I may go back to do is break them down into like 10 or 15-minute segments. Each one now is between 30 and 40 minutes. And I think it may be too much for people to digest, but I tell them, you need to know this. You need to understand this. I said, I put together a PDF handout also. I said, everything I talk about has the statute and the applicable case law. So I'm not just shooting from the hip, so to speak.
Let's talk about what happened to you personally and how you started realizing based on your own case. I mean, they messed with the wrong person, it looks like, because you are a very astute, like you said, you're successful. And what happened? What did they accuse you of? And how was it wrongly? And then how did you realize that this was a big mess? And then I want to get into what you learned about this organization, because I don't think people realize the history of this. Like we said before we started the show, this is 100-year-old history in the making, and it's been planned. And that's what I want to get to. But first, how did what happened to you?
Mine was an ordinary bottom spanking of a 10-year-old. So my son hadn't gotten a spanking in 10 years, and he was, for some reason, just out of control. I was getting called by the teachers. I caught him up at 4:00 in the morning playing the Xbox. He was just, I don't know how to describe it, but he was not acting like himself. He wasn't listening to me. He was stealing. He was lying, and it was just so out of character. And I just said, okay, it's time to go old school, so to speak, because these things didn't happen in my time, and they may have, but I tell you, every child I knew when I was growing up respected their parents. If our parents told us to go to sleep, we didn't get up at 4 a.m. and start playing network video games with our friends. We didn't steal. We didn't lie. And so it wasn't as if my son wasn't knowledgeable. And as a matter of fact, my son had skipped a grade. He was actually too smart.
He might have been acting out because he was bored, and then maybe he had some social interactions. It could have been the school and everything else, but regardless, you got to do something about it. I'm a parent. I get it. So what happened?
So from that spanking, he told our babysitter, who then turned around and called the police, who then called CPS, because my former wife, the children's mother, and we've been divorced over 11 years, had told my son, unbeknownst to me, he said, if your father ever spanks you, call the police. So I had no idea that this was going on. I was out to dinner. I get a call from the police, and my son had told the babysitter that their mother said to call the police if I ever spanked him. So at 10 years old, he's having the babysitter call the police because I spanked him. And so, and I spanked him on the behind. So when I say spank, it was, we're talking about transient pain, temporary marks, no medical attention. CPS didn't take him to the hospital. They didn't do anything. There was no Band-Aids. It was none of that at all. It was just him saying that I spanked him. That's all it really was. So they started this, an abuser, you're a black man. Why are all black men so quick to spank their children? I mean, the social worker said this to me on our very first meeting. I said, you know nothing about me. You have no idea, who I am or what we go through and why I do what I do. How dare you say that, all black people are violent and spank their children, So we had this long dialogue, and I'm not going to go into all that right now, because I think the color of my skin made them treat me differently. I think as from day one, because I mean, the social worker let it be known to me because I was Black. She told me on the very first day I met her, she was going to make sure that I never got my kids back again. And she did
Wow.
everything she could. She lied, she falsified reports. I mean, when I say on the first day, I was at the police station just for questioning. I came down, they said, come down, we have your kid. I came down, and she's telling me that she knows nothing about me, and she's telling me I'm never going to get my kids back again. And so that in and of itself told me what was going on. And I just said, I looked at her and I just said, whatever, you know, I'll see you in court. We're going to talk. I'm not talking to you, you know. So what was so fascinating is that because I refused to speak to the social work and the police, they literally told me, they said, fine, you don't want to speak to us? All right, we're going to put you in jail. I'm like, for what? They said, because we can. We're going to put you in a 72-hour hold. We're going to put you in jail for 72 hours because you refuse to talk to us. I said, no, I didn't say I refuse to talk to you. I said, I'm not going to talk to you without a lawyer. That's my right. They were like, okay, you want to play that way? We're going to play this way. So from the outset, because I was exercising my constitutional rights, I was being demonized, you know, and it went on and on and on through the entire case until I finally fought back and had the case dismissed. But it went on far longer than it should have.
And they were falsifying records, and they were lying about things, and why do you think they were doing all that? And this is why we got to get to the crux of the BS that so many parents run across. And it's not just Black people, right? I mean, I do know that because I've talked to other people, there's a higher percentage of Black people that get caught up in this. But it does happen, because I know your first case was with a white woman. It happens to poor people, right? I
Correct.
mean, is it
Correct.
Is it a poor people thing, or is it you're not poor? I mean, you're very successful. Is it poor and Black? Is it kind of like if you're poor or if you're Black, you're kind of lumped together?
Well, it's kind of interesting. There's a caste system in America. And if you look at our socioeconomic scale, people talk about the caste system in India. I'm like, well, we have one in America too. And it's really interesting if you hear the different nationalities talk about it. You know, you'll have African Americans will even talk about the color of their skin, you know, light skin versus dark skin. And you'll hear the Latinos talk about Cubans versus Dominicans. And then
that's too bad.
If you even look at Caucasians, in the turn of the century, it was like, oh, the Irish are no good, and the German. So there's always been this caste system. If you weren't like white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, you know, that's like the top. You know, everything
That's
below
awful.
that,
Yep,
it's going down. If you really think about it, and Blacks have always been at the bottom. I mean, we were slaves here for 400 years.
Don't you think it's changing though? I mean, even though it was, you know, it look at you. You're a successful businessman. You are making a difference for so many people's lives. You know, 200 years ago, there'd be no way you could do what you're doing. And now you're somebody that so many people can look up to. And so it's changing. It's not fast enough for either of us, because, you know, I coached hockey. Can you imagine that? Coaching hockey in the hardest core, I don't know if you know, some of the most elite programs. And man, that wasn't a sexist situation, but I wasn't going to let that get to me. I'm still going to be successful. And the only way to be successful is to say, I can't let them bring me down. I'm going to be successful no matter what. And if I don't have confidence in myself, then nobody's going to think I'm anything. And I'm not going to let them take me down. So I was the first one in a lot of cases to coach at some of these programs. But that takes a lot of confidence, and it takes I refuse to let somebody treat me like that attitude. But I noticed from 20 years ago, from when my daughter was born to today, there's been a big change. And so at least the momentum is going in the right way, right? I mean, still isn't fast enough. But
now, it's funny you should say that, because I feel it's going in the opposite direction. I feel
okay, explain that.
we actually had it better in the 60s than we do now. And when I say that, while there was a lot going on, when I say better, and I'm going to talk about as a class of people. Uh, so there was segregation, and that was terrible. You know, let's make no mistakes about that. But if you look at uh, African Americans overall as a whole, we had our own businesses, we had our own hotels, we had the family unit. I am a product of my environment. I am the product of a two-parent family who although we're middle class, my mother went to college and my mother was in nursing and my father was a manager down at the Longshoremen's Union in Port Elizabeth, New Jersey. So I had both my parents my entire life, and their goal is you are going to school. You will bring home nothing less than a 90, an A. We'll accept a B, but for every A you get $5.
That's awesome.
And so we were rewarded, and so we read, we went to church. So I'm a product of my environment, and that is a two-parent family environment. So I look at what has transpired since the 60s. So it's passé to be a racist now, openly be a racist, unless you're in the South. I've done projects in the South where they will openly tell me, "You're not like any black person I know." I hate when I hear that because I'm like everyone I know, and the ones that when I say that, the ones that I associate with, and it's not that I pick who I associate with. I'm working in corporate America, so I'm dealing with other African Americans. But then I look at my family, and my family have they've gone to college. I have some that don't. I am from the inner city. My father left the inner city to give us a better opportunity. So my father's half of the family was still in Newark, New Jersey, in Irvington. Newark's one of the largest cities in New Jersey, and is our family, and I say my collective, my brother, my sister, did we do better from leaving Newark, going out into the suburbs, and having a two-parent family? Absolutely. That is why we are successful. So I'm going to jump back and talk about why things have gotten worse, especially since the Clinton administration, or maybe slightly before, maybe Reagan. But when this war on drugs, which they started, which disproportionately affected the people of color, has disproportionately separated the African American community. We have approximately 2.7 million African American men in jail. We have all these single, parent, families. And now what CPS is doing is they're attacking the single parent. They've always attacked the families, poor or otherwise. But even when you look at CPS, which was kind of interesting, if you look at its foundation, how it was actually organized, it wasn't actually organized specifically for blacks, but the way it was organized was that we will help parents that are deserving, that child welfare. People we felt were deserving, we give them money. People who we felt were not deserving and were poor and couldn't afford to take away their children, we take their children, put them on an orphan train, and send them out west to families that could better take care of them. Well, what ended up happening is, when I say the by design part, it was set up such that if we feel you're undeserving or low class, well, we're going to take your child and we're going to give it to a family who we think can do better. Well, if you look at our caste system and our socioeconomic scale, that disproportionately hit all of the poor people, so that most people in CPS now are poor. And then you look at the disparity, and the disparity is can I say it's race? Well, you know about the disparity for 10 years in Minnesota. It's been in every out-of-home placement report for the last 10 years. They've talked about it. So instead of correcting it, you've done nothing to lessen it or decrease it. You create a second group, and you say, we're taking away too many blacks. All right, we got to create another group called other, where 60% of this group are other. One of the parents is African American. So you actually take the African American and split them up try and split them up by race if they're have any other race besides African. I'm like, wait a minute, every African American in this country is mixed. There is no one here. I worked in Africa for 3 years. I don't look like I'm an African, you know. So the system in and of itself was constructed to provide for women who they felt were needy or good mothers, where say the father died and the mother was left a widow or something of that nature. But if the woman had a child out of wedlock, or she was too poor to take care of her children, well, we take their children.
It kind of reminds me of what they did to the Indian reservations, the Native Americans, because they put them on all these boarding schools because they wanted the children to be raised better by people that know better. They ended up killing half the kids. It was awful. I think if there's one group in this world that's probably had it the worst, it's the Native Americans, and the average person in the United States doesn't realize this. If they did, they would stop it right away. But it because they hide it. It's all hidden. The mass media is terrible.
100%.
Yeah, it's terrible because nobody knows what's really going on. But it reminds me of that. And so it seems like it all came from the same philosophy. It's almost like a eugenics philosophy.
Correct. We want to change everyone and make them in our image. It was tantamount to Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler said, we're the superior race, and everyone needs to be this way, and this is the way we're going to make everyone, and we're going to make them in this image. And if you disagree with us, we're going to exterminate you. And so Americans have a violent history. America, from inception to now, has been very, very violent. And people want you to forget that. We portray America as this utopia. And I'm like, you got where you are by killing off the natives. People don't realize the Indians have it worse than us. I mean, they're taking disproportionately, because I put the other race and the African Americans together. I say they're taking 8% of African Americans. They're taking 18% of the natives into childcare. And when I looked at that, I was like, oh my goodness, someone has it worse than us. So I've even been trying to contact the native tribes, the natives group, and I've been trying to get them to, that's.
But the natives are worse. The natives are worse on trafficking because the FBI doesn't track their numbers. But the deep state, and I'm going to bring this deep state into this, and this is what people don't realize, the deep state uses the Indian reservations for all sorts of loopholes. So the Indian reservations are very controlled. The deep state uses the black community to keep themselves into power and to brainwash them, dumb them down, and to keep them into power. And to, my dad always used to say they bribe the people to vote. In other countries they do it openly, where they bring them all, feed them lunch, and expect you to vote for them. I mean, it's really open. I think in this world, the black community is expected to vote a certain way, and they are brainwashed to do that. And it's by design too. And the only way to get out of it is to say, hell with this. We're done with your system, and we're going to define it on what results actually get done. And so watching you go, hell with this, I'm going to get results done, and I'm going to fight for everybody. I love the fact that you haven't taken, even though we're going to talk about the reality of this, and it comes into the Black and Native Americans, it also comes into the poor people. And the first case that you took on was a white woman, because you aren't seeing color. You're seeing suffering families and suffering children, and suffering children don't have a color, right? I always say they're just souls that are suffering. I mean, and so when you go into this, you're not going into it in a way that just looks at one race, right? But it's hard to not, I mean, you have to notice the numbers. I mean, it is what it is, and it is a eugenics program.
It is, and I don't, as I mentioned earlier, I don't look at what I do as I'm fighting for one race. I'll just say it that way. I am fighting against the system. I'm fighting against a construct.
Yep.
I when I looked at it,
absolutely.
Initially I was, it's a black thing. And then once I started analyzing what was going on, and I started looking at the history, and I started looking at the statutes and how no one ever won a CPS case, civil case against the government. As a matter of fact, people don't even try. Everyone's just like, you can't beat the government. You'll never win against the government. And so I looked at what was happening. I ascertained it was by design. I did this by using the government's own statistics. These are on my website. I have links to the actual documents on the Minnesota State website, the federal government's website, all the different foundations where I pulled, information, everything that talks about the trauma of separation. And I'm like, guys, this is happening to everyone. I need you to wake up to understand what's going on. You're talking about 15,000 children being separated at the border. Do you understand that they separate 500,000 children in America annually? That the federal government subsidizes the state $29 billion annually. They take that money out of the Social Security fund, which never gets replenished. I said, the only way that the states obtain the money is if they take the children and put them in foster care. I have laid everything out systematically. I'm like, don't take my word for it. Here's the document. You don't have to believe the numbers, but I say, I'm going to say this to you. I said, the government, if anything, underreports everything. But in this particular instance, they have to be spot on or relatively spot on because that's how they get their federal funding. Meaning, if they don't give, the U.S., the federal government, their numbers, the federal government doesn't reimburse them. So if anything, they want their numbers to be accurate because the federal government, they do audits. And in Minnesota's last audit, they were penalized $2.5 billion because they had, inaccuracies, in their audit. But that's literally how these states get their money. So you're sitting here looking at the allocation. And so that's when you start to understand. And so it was the fact that no one believed me when I kept trying to tell people that, this is an adversarial relationship. If CPS comes into your life, you might as well, even though it's on the civil side, you might as well treat it like a criminal case. Keep your mouth quiet, get a lawyer. You're not going to talk yourself out of it. The only way you're going to get out of it is to fight your way out of it. And that's just it. It's designed to take your child. People are like, well, why did they give you such a hard time? Well, if you saw pictures of my children are fair-skinned and attractive. So from a foster care perspective, my kids would have been adopted. So my son Xander, the one they kept for 20 months, they already had a foster family that wanted to adopt him. If they had kept my youngest Aramis, which is a 6-year-old, they gave back. Aramis has like blue hazel eyes, so he would have been gone probably the fastest. They want good-looking children because these are the ones that they can adopt out, and they get more money. The CARES Act that the Clinton administration put in actually provides an incentive to have the children adopt in 15 months or less. So there's this incentive that the states get more money if they can adopt out the kids. Well, the better looking the kids or the younger the children, the faster they get adopted. So if you look at the children that are in the foster care system or that are aging out, they're all the older children who are minorities that people don't want to adopt. So
Well, I got to tell you, the eyes thing, my daughter, I just want to tell you, my daughter has this, I tell her she has Kardashian eyes. She's the dark brown eyes. My husband's Hispanic, so that's what I think is beautiful. She dyed her hair blonde. I'm like, why the hell are you dyeing your hair blonde? You have that Kardashian look. But anyways, I I'm seeing that this system is set up, and they get paid for every child they take away and every child they adopt out.
This is the part that amazes me the most about the system, and why I say, the train is running on schedule. Okay, so by your own admission, you're saying I'm taking this child, and when I say take this child, 84% of the children that are taken by CPS are not abused. 84% are neglect. This comes from the ASCAR report, the federal government report. Only 6%, are taken based upon sexual allegations not proven, and 12% are taken on physical abuse allegations. 84% are neglect, and neglect is pretty much being poor or whatever the social worker says. A lot of people said, "Oh, they're on drugs and things of that nature." I said, "No, that's not the case," and I said their own numbers respond to this.
What do you say about the situation? Because I've covered situations where Child Protective Services are called 15 times. They didn't get the kid, and the kid dies in custody. So it seems like they have extreme neglect by the agency, and then overzealous situations like you're talking about. How does that all fit into the same agency?
Well, it's a caseload thing. They're overburdened. So what happens? Each case, they can get paid up to 15 months. And so this is the part that I said is completely allowed. It's irrational. So you take a child by neglect, and I'll answer your question at the end so you understand what I'm talking about. They'll take a child from neglect. So once they have that child in the system, they can keep that child in the system for up to 15 months, and they can bill the federal government. So they will pay a foster family, approximately $700 to $1,000 per month per child that family fosters, and do that for 15 months to receive the federal funding. Then they'll turn around and tell the other family, "You're too poor." I'm like, well, take the money that you're giving to this family that doesn't need it, give it to the person who you're saying is too poor and needs help, needs assistance. Help raise them up, right? Then they can keep their child. Why are you taking the child and not helping the mother? Keep the child at home, take that $1,000 a month, help the mother. Even if you don't give it directly to the mother, give her a debit card that she can only use the food store. Buy furniture. Here, go buy 2 beds. We'll be in there next month to check to make sure you got 2 beds, or whatever the case may be.
Exactly. It saved the whole system money.
Correct. So it would be cheaper to keep that child at home than it would be to remove the child. Kin care, putting it with the family or the relative, also would be cheaper. They don't do it. So if we're sitting here saying you're not taking the cheaper road, you're taking the most expensive road for a reason. And so that's what I'm, when I'm.
Yeah, and that's that reason I want to get to. Let's get to, why are they spending the most amount of money?
Well, it's big business. And so if we come back and you say, but they only have 1 child, and, how are they making all this money? But people don't understand. For every child, you have a caseworker. That caseworker has a supervisor. That supervisor has a director. And then they have a foster family. So you have this hierarchy. Outside of that, they know that the child is being traumatized because the child has been removed from their family household, their standard environment, the only environment they know. Oh, we have to get the child a psychiatrist. We have to do medical examinations. We have to do all of these things that child needs. And so it's turned into a big money-making industry. It's business. It's big business. It's a multi-billion-dollar business because the government is only paying a percentage, and the government states it's paying $29 billion. Well, then look at the other 50 states. Let's add up what they're spending. Let's look at the doctors, the lawyers, the court reporters, the public defenders, the guardian ad litem, the social worker, the director. All of these people are getting paid. It's a machine. It's gotten to the point it's a self-preserving machine. In Minnesota, DHS is the 4th largest agency. In almost every state, DHS is like the second, third, or fourth largest agency in every state. It's billions of dollars going through it, and they don't want to stop this cash cow, this money train. And so they know that they can uh, build the government for 15 months because that's the limit that's set in the CARES Act. And at the end, if they adopt that child out, they get additional monies. So they have all of these people getting paid, and so the doctors are on their payroll, the psychiatrists are on their payroll. Everyone is on like the CPS payroll. Like when they were trying to have me take evaluations and assessments, I say, fine, I'm going to go to an independent person. I'm not going to go to one of your people because your people are being paid, by you, and they want referrals. So they're going to continue to do what you want them to do. I said, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to get an independent assessment, and I'm going to give that to you. No, I'm not going to take your analysis. I don't do drugs. If you can prove that I do drugs, have at it. But I'm not giving you a hair follicle test. I'm not giving you anything because I don't do that. I've already told you I don't do that. So you need to prove that I do that. So I was probably their most frustrating client because they're used to dealing with people at a lower socioeconomic scale who don't have the money, and they will lie to the parents. They will say, if you want your child back, here's what you need to do. You either need to confess, you need to agree to services. Well, if you do this service and do this case plan, you'll get your child back faster. Well, in fact, that's a lie. That's the biggest lie they tell every single parent. Just do this case plan and we'll give you your child back. And every parent that comes to me said, it's been 12 months, it's been 15 months. I'm like, because you agreed to do what they said. I said, most people don't realize that they have to come to court and present evidence that shows that you're guilty. They can't do it, which is why they ask all the parents to do the services, because they can't prove in court what they're supposed to. Even in Minnesota, it says the social workers have 60 days to substantiate their allegations. The heinous thing about the Minnesota court system, and this, if I hear one more time, we're doing it for the babies, we're doing it, I'm going to scream. And when I say that, I feel we need CPS. Children need to be taken away from some of these parents. Trust me, because I've talked to a few and I'm like, I can't help you. The way they're doing it is not correct. It needs to be an overhaul. People talk about defund CPS. I'm like, no, we need CPS. We need to get rid of all of the top level administration, and we need to take the new people. Believe it or not, all of these new social workers that come in that really want to help, that leave the system, they say, why do we have such a huge turnover in CPS? I said, because all of these people come in and they want to help families, and then they come to CPS and say, you do nothing but destroy families. And so I talked to a lot of social workers, and you're going to be hearing, later on, a lot of testimony from social workers, from guardian ad litems. People, as this case moves forward, people are going to be very, very surprised because I'm doing things that other people aren't doing, because I'm approaching this as a business, and my business is going to be successful one way or another. I'm going to help parents fight against CPS. I'm going to help parents get their children back. I'm going to stop all this blah, blah. I see from all these other organizations. I'm not saying that what the organizations are saying are incorrect. The other parental rights organizations are incorrect. I'm like, it's words without actions. You're not helping the parents. All you do, you're regurgitating information. And I said, they don't need that. They don't want to hear that. My ultimate goal is to raise enough money that I want a staff of attorneys. I want staff lawyers. And that's all we're going to do is defend parents. I'm like, and don't get me wrong, some of these parents are guilty and they need to have their kids taken. But that's not what
exactly.
Those are the ones I'm talking about. I'm talking about the percentage of children where calls are made, where allegations come in, and we're talking about a high percentage are screened out. Well over 50%, are found to be innocent. The state can't prove their allegation. The parents think, well, okay, what do you want me to do? I'll do anything to get my kids back. And the state knows that, and I'm like, no. They're not supposed to be doing that. I'm like, let me show you how to get your kid back in 60 days. And I did that with the Amanda Weber case. I'm like, this is what we did. The state couldn't prove their case. They kept trying to get Miss Weber to sign a case plan, to agree to services, and I said, no, the answer is no. And at the end, they couldn't prove their case. And what was fascinating, the social workers resorted to lying. And when we went to impeach the social workers, the judge went ballistic. I'm like, you're supposed to be sitting here impartial. I tell everyone, if you get a chance, go listen to the Amanda Weber transcripts. Go get the transcript of the court hearing. We're thinking about doing that and posting them. But what the judge did was totally inappropriate. He was actually covering up and protecting the social worker.
I'd like to play the clip from the news of this woman. This is where somebody sent this to me, and this is how I found you.